Today we're here with Timothy Seamans, who's the Cathedral School for Boys chaplain here at Grace Cathedral. And ever since I met him, I've been so impressed with him. He's like the best chaplain ever. But I remember the first sermon I heard you give was about angels. Do you remember the sermon about angels? What did you say about them that was so compelling to me that I'm still thinking about it all these years later?
I think I voiced my skepticism about kind of angels in popular culture, or at least how they're usually imagined, like touched by an angel or this person on your shoulder. And I remembered an experience I had as a student when I was studying abroad at Oxford, and felt compelled by the music that was coming out of one of the chapels to step into what I didn't know was an evensong service, this sung thing that we also do here at the cathedral. And I wouldn't consider myself a particularly super faithful person at the moment, but the song drew me in, and I sat down, and I think I learned a new way to pray that night that I had never experienced before. And later on, I said, I think the end of my sermon was, if I had to paint a picture of me entering that space, there definitely would be an angel directing me out of sight, but nevertheless present in that photo. So I think that kind of compelled me to think about, I like to take ideas about spirituality that I find sometimes uncomfortable and try to make sense of them in my own experiences as a younger person and in the present. And so that was how angels factored into that, which and until that sermon I would have not had. The last thing you would have found me preaching about was my experience with angels, but I was grateful that I was asked to preach on St. Michael's Day.
It was a great sermon. It moved me so deeply. You know, one of the things that I think is really powerful is just, I like someone was talking to me about you today, and I said, listen, to have someone be able to talk to a kindergartner and a third grader and a sixth grader and an eighth grader. It's just, adults just don't go through so many totally different developmental stages. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if you can talk just a little bit about just like the spirituality of young people. Just like, how's that different than adult spirituality, and how can you be there for them as a chaplain?
Yeah, I think that young people's spirituality is rooted in experience first and foremost, and so it's a physical thing. It's sensory. It's rooted in stories. And what I like most about working with young people and their spirituality is, I think we're just born with a spirituality that is like our capacity for language. We absorb it, especially in your younger years, so quickly, so intuitively, and even before we learn how grammar works, we already know how to use it. Yeah. And I think there's a spiritual grammar to each person that's just innate to the human. And with young people and children, what I love most is that there is the bias that you develop as you're growing just doesn't exist in those younger stages. And so the bias, I think, oftentimes will create a barrier or a buffer between a person and their experience of God, or how they understand that experience. And what I love working about young people, whether it's kindergartners and doing a walking prayer on the labyrinth, or with third graders, and I just reenacted a foot washing,
That's cool.
is those experiences are kind of unfiltered, and they're the biases and the prejudices or just the negative experiences of religion that people may have later on in life. For many of those kids, those don't exist yet, and so it's an opportunity to show them, hopefully, as pure and as honest or as close to truth as you can get, just through their experience and acting it out and doing a ritual. So much of these things that we later learn language for, and learn how to describe, first comes the experience. And then as you get older, more and more we think about faith as a description or as having the right beliefs. That's a very intellectual way of going about it. And I think while the intellectual way is appropriate at certain stages for sure, I think the concrete, the experiential, the embodied way of doing it is not just natural for children, it's necessary. And you can't really get away with a lecture or a sermon that doesn't really engage the senses, really engage the body, and really engage stories. And
yeah, it was when I was in seminary. I took a course with Professor Charles Hallisey, and it was comparative religious rituals. So it's almost like a world religion class on Zen Buddhism, Hinduism, and Eastern Orthodoxy, which was totally about the rituals that people practice. You know, you're the chaplain for boys from every different background. I mean, so you have rich and poor, but you also are the chaplain for children who are growing up in non-religious homes and also in religious homes, but from a different tradition than the one that you're in. How do you handle that, you know, being chaplain for people in those different kinds of situations?
It's a great question. I think how I approach it is really appreciating an individual child's location, where they're coming from. So if I, for instance, if we want to wonder about, when you were thinking about Thanksgiving, like Eucharist means Thanksgiving. So of course we're going to talk about how different people give thanks and what they're thankful for. The common theme throughout Christianity, obviously, but as far as I am aware, every religion it is an essential part of our humanity to give thanks and to share that Thanksgiving with other people. And so when you start with a theme that is universal to our humanity, then you can look at how each person expresses that theme in their own life. And I think every boy and every girl and every person gives thanks in their own way, and their families all families have some sort of tradition for what it means to show gratitude and to share gratitude with others. And so we can take that Eucharistic idea of Thanksgiving and welcome in every single person who's there, sharing their unique understanding of what Thanksgiving is. And I think the image of a table is appropriate, because we're all bringing our own plate, so to speak, to the table. And the important thing to me is to be able to name that what we're doing right then is a spiritual practice. And I think so often in a more secular world and environment, we just lose the language for pausing to recognize God in those moments. And so it's both the action of this is how we give thanks, and we have all these rituals and traditions in my family, to then naming, you know, God is in the gratitude, and when we pause before giving thanks and when we receive the gift of something, then we're participating in God as well. And when we feel that joy is not just yours, that joy belongs to the person next to you. It belongs to the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, that is connecting all of our joys together under one roof, or under many roofs, under one city, hopefully under one world. And so there's an appreciation for pluralism, but it's not a sort of pluralism that just tries to jump to the universal without going through the particular of each person's lived experiences.
Oh, that's great. It's just such a unique setting to be able to minister to so many different kinds of people, and I'm very grateful for what you do. I know you just finished your dissertation thesis, and what was the title of your thesis, and are you going to turn it into a book?
The title is Incarnational Pedagogy for a Secular Age. So I used Charles Taylor's a famous Canadian philosopher who's coined this term, a secular age, which affects everybody. It's not people of faith and people without faith. We all just live in this, just like we live in modernity. And I tried to really ask the question, what does religious education look like in a secular age? And the approach I use is one that emphasizes embodiment, incarnation in the Christian language, and kind of applies John Dewey, who's
right
in a
our
stained glass window right above my head, to
a common faith.
what does experiential education look like for teaching about faith? And I kind of say that you can't really understand. In order to understand, you have to practice.
Yeah.
There's a quote I like dancing about, writing about music is like dancing about architecture.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a way of saying, like, you can't, to actually understand an experience, you have to try it. And what I try to do is offer students the opportunity to experience something and then decide for themselves whether or not they personally want to pursue that, and whether they can understand why other people have practiced this for millennia on end. And each different faith tradition, I think, creates its own kind of paradigm for pedagogy. So Christianity is going to take one that really emphasizes incarnation and embodiment, since that's the basis. But Judaism, for instance, may really emphasize remembrance and passing things on through a generational lineage. Buddhism and Hinduism are going to set their own paradigm for how to understand their own faith traditions. And so I think in a pluralist environment, which we hopefully aspire towards, it's really trying to understand your neighbor's faith, but understand it on their terms instead of the terms of
your own background.
Exactly. So hopefully my dream would be to expand that into being in conversation with a little more of the current conversations in education and religious education, both in public and private schools. So to be continued on that
Yeah,
one.
definitely.
But
I'm
I do
looking
have
forward to learning more.
a prayer book for children and
Yes,
families that will
exactly.
come out in May. So if you can't wait for the dissertation, there's the prayer book.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to checking them both out. I'm so glad. Thank you so much for being on the show, and thanks so much for what you do too. It's just such an important thing to see this important part of a child's life that they have a chance to grow and flourish in that area in their spiritual life.
Thank you.
My name is Malcolm Clemens Young. I'm the Dean of Grace Cathedral here in San Francisco, California. Thanks for watching More Good News.